So I'm Father Tim Coday, missionary of the Precious Blood. I've been with the community first as a high school seminarian at Precious Blood Seminary, and then after that in Brothers Formation, and then I was finally professed in 1978. And then in 1984, I volunteered to help with the Italian missionaries in Tanzania. The Italians had started the mission in 1961, and they were looking for people to go over and help. So I volunteered to go over. So from 1984 until 2016, I was in Tanzania, and then came home for a short time. And then I was asked if I would be willing to go back. The Tanzanians had invited me to go back, and they wanted me to help revive a small hospital in very rural Tanzania. So this evening, I want to share with you what I've been doing. I went back to Tanzania in September of 2019. And so I'd like to share with you where I'm living and what I've been doing and what I found when I got there. So the video or this slide presentation will cover the two hats that I wear. One is the director of the hospital that I was asked to rehab, so I've been working on that. The other hat that I wear is associate pastor of Charles Luwanga and his companions, which is the parish that was just founded after I got to Malongwe. So there's the two sides of what we're doing. So as I already said, I live in the town of Malongwe. It's a small village, very rural, in the region of Tabora. The regions in Tanzania are like our states, so like the state of Missouri. So the region of Tabora, and I live in, like, here is Clay County. Over there, it's Uyui is the county that I live in. So that just to give you some geography. And Malongwe is on the central line. The central railway line was built by the Germans when they occupied, at that time it was called German East Africa, that was before World War I. So they put in a railway from Dar es Salaam all the way to Kigoma. And so they put in the railway, and Malongwe is on the railway. In the early days, the missionaries had the mission house in Itigi, which is about 75 miles east of Malongwe. And in those days, there was no passable road during the rainy season, so they would put their small motorcycle up on the train and travel to Malongwe and then unload their motorcycle and then spend a couple of days there. So they built a small house. They built a small house in Malongwe, so when they got off the train, they had a place to stay, to spend 3 or 4 days there to take care of the spiritual needs of the people. And they found, because of its remoteness, they decided to build this health facility, a small hospital. But originally, it was on the other side of the river. So during the rainy season, people had to traverse the railway trestle to get across. But a lot of people refused, because if you've ever crossed a railroad trestle, you can look through the rails and see the river below, so they were afraid to go across. The primary school was also on the other side of the river. So the government moved the primary school, and so then the missionaries decided to also move the hospital. And so that's where I am now. So this is a small short video of the road going from the main road east and west, going into Malongwe, where I live. So coming up in the trees,
Recording in progress.
right in there, as I get closer, you'll see those are beehives they strip the bark off of trees and then plug the ends and then use them as beehives. Originally, Malongwe was known for its lumber, but then they cut down all the trees. And so now most of the people their cash crop is honey. During the rainy season, this is all mud. Okay, in Tanzania, geographically, it's about twice the size of the state of California. And so there's about 40 million people. And those 40 million are made up of 100.
You're hitting the button inadvertently. There you go.
There's 127 different ethnic groups of people that live in the geographic area of Tanzania. They all have their own culture and customs and language, but the language that everybody speaks is Swahili. And so most Tanzanians speak at least 3 languages, and some of them even many more. So there's the area that I live in are the Wasukuma and the Wanyamwezi. So 2 different ethnic groups that predominantly live in the area where I'm at now. And there's most of it's young people because of the life expectancy is only 65. When I went in 1984 to Tanzania, the life expectancy was 45. So in the time that I've been there, it's come up 20 years. So there's been some improvement there. And we have many denominations of Christianity and also Muslims. Malongwe is kind of more or less not too far away from the trade routes that the Arabs used during slave time. And so they would come from the west and then go down this area. So there's the Arabic influence along the way. This is one of my employees, Mary. She's a nurse. That's her child. This is a short video. This is coming down the road. If you see that sign, that goes up to the primary school. So if you're going down the road, it'd be on your right. And now we're going to turn left and go into the dispensary, the hospital there where I live and work. So the hospital and the primary school are like on the outskirts of the city. So like what we would call downtown is further down that road. This is the new area that was that the missionaries got to build the hospital after moving it to this side of the river. So that's the hospital there. And then these are staff housing on that side. This door there, that's where one of the doctors lives. And then the rest of that is storage and that kind of thing. So karibuni is Swahili to welcome all of you. If I was welcoming one person, it'd be karibu, but since you're many people, it's karibuni. So welcome to Malongwe Health Facility. So as I pointed out before in the video, so this is the complex that we have. So this is the hospital. This is the hospital. We don't have any electricity. And so we have the solar panels you can see on the top of the house. And then over here, these two are the staff housing. And then the one doctor lives here in this side. So this is what the hospital looked like when I first arrived. And then I got some help. So then we started the repairs and painting to kind of fix the place up a little bit. This was the sidewalk. During the rainy season, it's like a river that runs in front of the hospital. And so they put these bricks down so they wouldn't have to walk in the water to get in. So then we put in a sidewalk and then put a culvert underneath so the water could still flow, but then people could cross and have dry feet. They didn't track mud into the hospital. So this is going to give you an idea of what, when I first got there, there was no water. There was no electricity. This was what I found with the staff toilets. When I got there, if the staff had to use the restroom, they had to go back home to use the toilet. So finally, after I rummaged through a bucket of keys, I found the keys to the staff toilets. And then I realized why they weren't using them. They were just holes in the floor and it went clear through the foundation. So they kept the doors locked to keep the snakes and animals out of the hospital. So there you see there were, before I arrived, there were 2 male nurses on the staff. And so they had a small garden. So they got tired of carrying water, so they hooked a hose to the faucet inside the restroom and then run it through that hole in the foundation out to water their garden. That's what that blue garden hose is. And that was the sink in the staff toilet room. So I found out that we had a well and there was a generator. So after I got it repaired and serviced and got it going, then we started pumping water up to the hospital. And that's the water tank. You can see up here. And that with the well, the pump there, that generator runs the electric pump to pump water up there, and then from the tank it flows into the hospital. But after we got the tank full, we still didn't have any water. So we spent 3 days, because no one knew where the pipes were. We spent 3 days digging trenches to find out where the pipes were going. And when we got there, the water is so hard that the mineral deposits plugged all the pipes. So the steel pipes we replaced, and the black plastic pipes was full also, but it doesn't stick because they're smooth on the inside. So what I did is I had one guy climb up the tree, and then we passed the hose, the pipe up into the tree, and then we hit it with a hammer and knocked all of the stuff out. And so then once water started to flow, then I worked on all the plumbing. And by this time then COVID was a reality. And so then when I went to buy the faucets, I bought the type that you can close with your elbow. So once they wash their hands, they don't have to touch anything else after that. And so once I got the sinks working and cleaned, then I was so tickled, everything's working. I went outside, water's just running out on the ground. The contractor, to save money, used the thinnest pipes as possible. And in our intense heat, the plastic pipes dried out and broke. So then we had to do all of the sewer system also. So the screens, I don't know if you can see it here, if you look real close, they were just rust. And if you just touch them, they just crumbled into dust. So you got somebody who's malaria, which malaria you get from a mosquito bite. So they have to be hospitalized because they're low on water. But then you put him in a bed and then the room's full of mosquitoes because there's no screens on the windows. And then also, if you can see, the windows were the louver type. Well, from dust and rust and rain and all that, they neither opened or closed. Whatever position they were in, that's where they were stuck. So then we put new screens on all the windows of the hospital and then put in all aluminum windows so that we could open them and close them depending on what the temperature was outside. So then this is a short video to just span the inside of the hospital. So that door that just went past, that was like OPD, outpatient department, and also the pharmacy. And then that's the doctor's office there. And then that's the door to the staff toilets. That's the injection room. And then there's a ward for male and female. And then in the far corner is a maternity ward, and this goes into the laboratory. So when I got there, the lab wasn't working. There was no lab technician. And if you would have seen that room when I first opened the door, I doubt you would have ever come back to get health care. But we got it all clean, and then I started following the regulations of the government that we could be, accredited and be legally in Tanzania do health care. And so one of the things is that we had to have a place where the lab technician could draw blood and do those other things because they're not permitted in the lab. So then we put in this partition so that they can go through the door there, and then there's the thing. And then on the other side, that door you can see right there, that goes into the lab itself. And then we also remodeled the maternity ward. We have lots of people that women come to give birth because education has spread and they know that it's better to give birth in a health facility rather than at home because complications can take place. So on the far side is the birthing bed, and then on this side of the partition is 2 beds where they can either rest after giving birth or they're resting waiting to give birth. And then there's the table with all of the needs that the doctors and nurses need for them. And then when I got there, there was no screwdriver or hammer or anything. So then before I came home, I was at the water project in Dodoma. And so I went back there and talked to the guys and asked if they would help me with a container. So then I moved the container from Dodoma to Tabora to make a shop. So I had a place to repair things. So this was, in a doctor's office, you have the screen, so you can kind of set it up and you can examine the patient. People walking by can't see. So this is what the screens looked like when I got there. And so then with the shop there, then we repaired them and had a lady sew new sheets for new partitions for the cloth part. And this is one of the staff houses. They're built kind of like duplexes. So they're in one building, there's 2 rooms. So there's 2 in each one. There's 2 bedrooms, a living room, dining room, then there's a corridor, and then there's a kitchen, a store, and then toilet facilities and shower and stuff. So this is what the outside looked like when I first got there. And so then to save the wall, and because rain would blow through those cracks, so then we repaired the cracks and then painted. We only did the walls that are facing to where the rains usually come from. There are other 3 walls we haven't finished yet. So then this is back to that picture that I showed you. The water is so hard, you can't use it to cook or to drink. So during the rainy season, we collect rainwater. And so then we have to store that. So we have 4 months of rain, and then we have 8 months of no moisture. It doesn't rain for 8 months. So we have to collect enough water for drinking and cooking to get us through to the next rainy season. So this picture you've seen, but you see the pipes, and then this is a tank to store rainwater. So we repaired 2 of them. There's still 3 of them to go. And then this is to give you an idea of what the apartments look like. This is where I live. This is the kitchen in the house where I am. This is what it looked like when I moved in. If you look where the stove is, so I had to sit on a little stool to cook because I got tired of bending over to cook. So then I built this table to raise the stove up to a working height. And then I got area then to do the other stuff, prepare the food. And then this is the guest bedroom. And then this is the toilet and shower and sink. The sink you can't see, it's on this wall over here. And then this is with the inside, the ceiling was falling down. Because the way the buildings were constructed, there was the ceiling and the roof, they couldn't breathe. There was no vent. And so in the intense heat, then it expanded, it pushed the nails right out of the ceiling board, and so it started to come down. And then you heard me say about the louvered windows, you couldn't open them or close them. So during the rainy season, this is how the staff, what they did to keep rain from blowing in and getting all their stuff wet. So this, now we're going to jump ahead. I think this slide might be over. Let me go this way first. So as you've seen, the hospital was in pretty sad shape. So right now, the income of the hospital doesn't meet the expenses. So I'm trying to come up with other projects that would be beneficial for the people, but also would have income for the hospital to meet the difference in the expenses and income. So this was a saw and planing machine that I bought because there's a lot of carpenters, but they do all the work by hand. They saw the log into boards by hand. They dig a hole in the ground and then put the log up. So one guy's down and one guy's up with a crosscut saw, and they saw the boards, and then they plane them down by hand with a block plane. So this I bought mostly just to help them plane them down, and then they can make a lot better furniture. And so then we're also looking for other projects.
That's a service you charge for.
Yeah, and then, right. They bring the boards, and then depending on how many times we have to run it through the machine, then we charge them. So then there's income. So then I'll go back. Oops. So this is now, we're going to take off the director hat and put on the associate pastor hat. So when I first got there, Malongwe and that whole area was still outstations of Itigi Parish. And so then once I moved there, the bishop decided to make that area a parish. So the pastor is a consolata father, and he lives in the town of Tura. That's where the parish seat is. And then the bishop asked me to be his associate. And so we have 11 towns in our parish. And so this is me and the Malongwe Church during the sacrament of baptism. I sent this picture home to my brothers and sisters to show how dangerous being a priest is. You see the kid with the candle? So we don't get hazard pay. So this is a video of going from the dispensary, and then we're going to see a little bit of downtown Malongwe, and then we're going to turn to the right and then go to the church in Malongwe, just to give you an idea of, you know, a little better where I live, and then you get to see the church. So the people then are getting water. That's what's in the buckets. And as I said, on the right side of this picture is the primary school. So that, like that first house you see, that's some of the teachers' housing. And the building there on the left, that's the Anglican church. So now we're coming close to the area where there's little shanties where they sell vegetables, tomatoes, onions, cucumbers, that kind of stuff. So then, see, this is a house where somebody lives, and then they built this little shack here on the side, and that's where then they have the stuff to sell. And then this is a gas station. They buy a drum of gasoline and then pour it into water bottles. And then they sell a half a quart or a quart of gas. And then these are the shops and so then this is now we turned the corner, now we're headed for the church. So this is during the dry season. That's why it looks so dry. During the rainy season, you almost can't get through here because of the corn. You can see the husks and stuff that were left there on the side of the road. But then these are weeds that grew up in the corn.
You mean it was planted with corn growing there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the weeds grew up after they harvested the corn.
Right.
Now, this is to give you an area, a little short video to show you the area of the church in the surrounding area. Those are all mango trees. So that's the church right there. Then that's our bell. It's a drum wheel from a truck. And then they hung it there and then they beat it with another piece of metal. That's the church bell. When I first got there, it was a mud walled church. And so we have mass at 6:30 in the morning. And so during mass one morning, 2/3 of one wall just fell. And so then the people pitched in and they made, this is all concrete block church now. Okay, now if you run this is to show you it's real short, but to show you the inside of the church. So this is the outside again, coming up towards the front door. Oh, not very clear, but anyway, that's the inside of the church in Malongwe. But then, like I already said, we have 11 towns. We travel about 600 miles a month, both of us, to get to the 11 towns to make the rounds for all the people to get mass. And this is a road that heads towards one of those towns. And then not all of the towns that we provide spiritual guidance have churches. And so like in this particular village, they have mass in the primary school. The principal allows them to have mass. And so here they're sitting there waiting for mass to begin. You can see up there, the desks are like this podium so that the kids can write. And so there's no tables. So what they do is they turn another one around the other way for the altar. So you have to be really careful of where you set the chalice, that it just doesn't roll off the. And then this is a church that people are building in Mabeshi. So, and this is basically the construction of how they do their houses also. The first time I went there to say mass, this is the condition the church was in. And it kind of looked like it might rain. So the people went up to the main road and asked the truck driver to borrow the tarp. So have it as a standby. So if it started to rain, they could throw the tarp over the top of the roof to keep it dry. It didn't rain. So this is kind of the hazards of getting to church during the rainy season. So I was headed for mass, got this far and got stuck. So I told the people, let's go have mass first and then we'll deal with trying to get the car unstuck. So we even broke up some of the church pews to put wood under the tires to try and get it out, to no avail. And so a good Samaritan, the guy in the blue truck, said, oh, that's no problem. I'll just hook a chain and pull you out. Okay. So he backed up too far and then he got stuck. So then we're trying to dig and push it, that big truck. So then a semi-trailer came and pulled him out. And then the two of them backed up, each had a chain and then pulled me out. But you can see here, like somebody even went and carried that big rock, trying to get it down underneath the tires so you'd have something to grip on. So when you leave, and during the rainy season, when you leave to go say mass, you never know what's going to happen. One time I was going along and, thinking about the homily and what I'm going to say and, like what Sunday this is and all that kind of stuff. So I was kind of, in a sense, daydreaming a little bit. All of a sudden, there was water halfway up the windshield. I went into a puddle in the road, and the water was halfway up the windshield. And then this is, sorry for the quality of the picture, but this is First Communion. We had First Communion there in Malongwe. And so that's my presentation. Thanks for listening. And if anybody has any questions. Feel free. Yes.
If you have a question, try to use a mic because it's easier for people on Zoom to hear us.
Yeah, I have what you said before about the water tower, the store of water, etc. Back several years ago when Father Deo was in Coday, and I was part of one of the commissions through church there, and we raised money for some water filters that were sent back to Tanzania to filter their water. And the story we were given that, they would go collect water, filter the best they could, and share with neighbors, those who could not. But these filters, they were little. They were, I don't know if y'all, I know that online cannot, but they were about the size of like a small pill bottle, prescription bottle.
Yeah.
Sorry. And all you needed was a 5-gallon bucket. And it came with an auger to drill a hole in. So Brad, you put the nasty water in it, go through this filter, the filter the water. You just back flush it, clean water to clean it out. There's no life expectancy yet on these filters. They're like a dialysis filter.
Mm-hmm.
The thing was when they're shut back that only the women could have possession of these filters. You said, why? Well, men like take things apart, see how they work, basically. But whatever, and the families names were put into a bucket, a small child drew names out. to get one of the filters. The thing was, okay, you got a filter, so then you helped 7 of your neighboring families. They kept growing from there. So how is the fresh water, the drinking water, whatever, where you're at? Is it, you know, you store it now, but is there?
Well, then for drinking, then it's rainwater.
Right.
So then for drinking, we boil it.
See, where Dale was from, there was, like you said, no rain and stuff. And they really had, there's a lot of sickness from the bad water.
Yeah, well, if you have like shallow wells.
Yeah.
And it's good water, then those filters work very well.
Yeah.
Where we're at, the groundwater is so full of minerals, it's so hard that you run it through a filter, it still isn't that good. But what they do in those areas, they're hand dug wells, or they're getting rainwater, say off the road. And so then it's muddy. And so yes, then you can collect that water and pour it in the top bucket, and then it's filtered, then it's good.
And I don't remember the stats on these filters, but they filtered out like 99.99% of
Right.
everything. By back flushing them, they cleaned it. Like I said, they had never found a lifespan on these filters as of that time.
Yeah.
And they're like lifeless. I mean, well, it never died. So, and then to get them through customs, I understand that they say, what are these? They explain that these are what what we want was medical equipment. They classify them as medical equipment to get them through all the customs to make them, go fine. Yeah.
The town of Malongwe, what's the population of it?
I would say, I don't know, I've been trying to talk to people, but I think it's in the neighborhood of 2,500 to 3,000 people.
So when you say we repaired something, you get workers from that town?
Oh, yeah. But, yes. The carpenters, like they helped me with what they could do. The only thing I did is when we did the sewer, then I worked with the plumber that I had when I was at the water project in Dodoma. I asked him, but then all of his helpers were all people from Malongwe.
How much have things changed in general in Africa in the 30 years, 35 years that you've been there?
Oh, it's unreal. I mean, like for an example, life expectancy went from 45 to 65. I mean, that says volumes right there. When I first went, I knew people who bribed the principal at the school to wipe their kids' names off because Tanzania law said you have to send your kids to primary school. But they wanted to keep them at home for in the fields and take care of the cow. So they would sell a cow to get money to bribe the principal to wipe off those kids' names. Now, like the school we have in Dodoma, people will go there at 3 o'clock in the morning to sit at the gate to be the first one in line to sign up. When I first went, there was only one university in Dar es Salaam. Now there are 13 universities. So higher education now is available to many, many people. The government have introduced student loans. So depending on your academic performance, if you do well, you can qualify for a government loan. And so they go on to higher education. And then they've introduced technical schools all across the country. And so to teach, like plumbing and welding and electricity, computer science, all of that kind of stuff. The tourist industry has drastically changed. When I first went in '84, there were no roads in Tanzania to get to the parks. So the people who could afford those types of vacations went to Nairobi because then there's 5-star hotels. They could be wined and dined. The Kenyans put them on buses, drove them across the border because all the best parks are in Tanzania. So now Tanzania, woke up, they redid the roads. In Nyereri's time, he nationalized everything. Then when Mkapa came in as president, he realized that they didn't have the expertise to run these types of things. And so they sold off a lot of that stuff. And so now hotels have opened, you know, like the Hyatt and Hilton are in Dar es Salaam and in the parks. So it's really changed. The big thing is like in Dar es Salaam in these days, it's comparable to anything you'd see here in Kansas City or cities in Europe. But you leave that metropolitan area, like where I'm at, and it's like you step back 2,000 years. So like the people that I live and work with, like they're all farmers, and their farm implement is the hoe. That's all they have. And so that's the big thing. There's been many, many changes. The roads, technology, access to cell phones. You know, and cell phones are cheap, you know, because like in this country, like now we're up to the iPhone 13, you know, and so iPhone 7, who would buy it? You know, that's old technology. And so those phones end up in Tanzania, they're brand new. And so then cell phones are really cheap. And so even a lot of people then can have access to a cell phone.
Just a minute. People on Zoom, you're now on display in the big screen in our gathering space here. If you have a question, I think you can ask it. If you unmute yourself, you can ask it yourself, or you can put it in a message in the chat box and I will ask it for you, whatever you want. Just kind of raise your hand, unmute yourself and ask a question. There is one question in the chat box. It says, what has been the effect of COVID-19 in Tanzania?
It's kind of a long story. When COVID first came out, the president was Magufuli, and he said there is no such thing as COVID. And he said the only reason they want us to wear masks is because they want to poison us. And so he refused to import masks. And he said, let's just pray to God and we'll be okay. Well, then God called him home, he died. And so then the vice president became president, and she, rather than just drastically changing a lot of his programs, used a lot of wisdom, you know, in order to win the people over. So she imported masks, but then took them to the laboratory. Like in this country, it's underwriters laboratories, you know, where they test the quality of something, whether it's good or not. Well, Tanzania has the same type of thing. So she took them there and then said, you know, Tanzanian scientists say that these are not poisonous, you know, they're there to protect you, to help you from getting sick. And so then on national TV, she wore one herself and wears it every place she goes, and then promotes that people wear masks. And then she did the same thing with vaccine. She imported the vaccine with Johnson & Johnson because it's easier to store than the other two because of keeping it so cold. And so she took it then to the labs, and then she could on national TV said, Tanzanian scientists say this is truly medicine and it's for our benefit and it's to keep us from getting sick. And then on national TV, she took the first shot. But it's, a lot of people have died. They didn't believe, they believed the former administration. And so in the big cities where there's a movement of people like Dar es Salaam, because you have the whole diplomatic corps of all the countries that Tanzania has diplomatic relations with, they're coming and going. In the north, the tourists are coming and going. And plus then there's movement across the border with Kenya and Uganda. So in those areas, COVID was really, really bad. Where I'm at, basically I can say, I mean, we wouldn't know if we saw it because there was no testing. But the people that live in Malongwe in that whole area, they don't move around. They're farmers, they have to take care of the farm, there's the animals. And so in a rural area, there wasn't that extent of death like there was in some of the bigger cities. Uh-huh.
And you said that they speak about 3 languages. So where you're at, what's the primary language they speak in the community that you're in?
Well, say if you're amongst themselves and depending on what ethnic group, like the Wasukuma speak Kisukuma. And the Wanyamwezi speak Wanyamwezi, but like say us, like in church and all of that, it's all Swahili.
No English,
No,
Spanish,
no.
really?
no.
Wow. Thank you.
Okay, well, if there's no other questions, thank you very much. Thanks for listening. I was really happy to share with you.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.